Hey everybody, welcome back to Backlog Banter. We're here again for another solo video. It's just myself, Abram Buhner, and I'm here to chat with you about a little game called Mafia Definitive Edition. But before we really get into my review of this game, I need to alert you to something very important, and that is, of course, in addition to my background here, of course, being this. Sick Joker amiibo. Picked him up from Target the other day when I was out buying toothpaste and things of that nature. He's going to sit right back there now with my plushies I got at PAX East and my King K. Rool amiibo, and then those two will, of course, join the other literal 70 amiibo I have at home. Got a little bit of an addiction, to be honest with you. But I also have not only just a love for amiibo, but a love for Mafia Definitive Edition, the new game, well, the new old game from Hangar 13 and 2K, of course being a remake of the very first Mafia game from, I believe, 2002, but do not fucking quote me on that. I'll know. But what you can quote me on is the fact that I really genuinely loved my time with Mafia Definitive Edition. Now, this is a review, but I'm not going to go over every component of the game in great detail. I just want to kind of break down why this game connected with me so much, what it does well, what its weaknesses are, and kind of leave you with that. And so my thesis about Mafia Definitive Edition, if you allow me to have a thesis on the game, is that it's really lovely in the way that it melds its louder set-piece moments with its quieter, character-driven moments. And I think that's what makes this game particularly special. As soon as you begin playing it, you're going to see how heavily it relies upon tropes of mob and gangster media, particularly films, especially The Godfather, when you realize you're playing as somebody who looks a lot like a young Vito Corleone, next to someone who looks a lot like a young Clemenza. And then the first mission is literally called An Offer You Can't Refuse. So that is certainly there. And as someone who loves The Godfather, who has reviewed both films for this channel, cards in the corner or in the description. I don't really know how to do cards. It's more Tucker's thing. But as someone who loves those and loves Goodfellas, this film, to go back to the idea of balance, is an interesting mix of like a Godfather, more cerebral, more slow-paced, more slow burn type of gangster film with a gangster squad, the Ryan Gosling, Josh Brolin shoot 'em up from, I think, 2013, another film I enjoy. But Mafia Definitive Edition does a nice job taking the appeal of both of those and mending them together. You're going to have plenty of car chases and shootouts and fistfights, but you're also going to have a lot of moments that are more about character, where you're walking your wife home and you're having a conversation early on in that relationship, or you're just riding around with your boys, collecting some debts, or pulling off some other crimes. It's really interesting how the developers are able to show some restraint in this respect and not just have the game be shootout after shootout after shootout. Now, the back portion of the game does devolve a little bit more into just shootout after shootout, but I will say it does feel earned with the way that the narrative moves. And I think the narrative is something I really want to point out, because like I said a little bit ago, I do love cinema with this aesthetic. I love the mob aesthetic, the gangster aesthetic. I think it's very, very interesting. And so, like I said, with how heavily this relies upon The Godfather and other pieces of, tentpole media in that genre, nothing about Mafia Definitive Edition storytelling reinvents the wheel, but I think it presents it in a really engaging way. Essentially, the game is told from the perspective of your character, Tommy Angelo, and his rise and fall in the Salieri crime organization. He begins as a cabbie and finds himself crossing paths with the very charismatic Sam and Polly, and then you have all kinds of adventures with them. And then things go awry. I'm not going to spoil them here, and as you'll be noticing in the footage I use, it's all from very early on in the game, as to not really spoil you as to what's to come, because like I said, I really love this game and I think you should check it out. But the overall narrative framing of the game is that you're playing as Tommy Angelo, right? But you're sitting down with an Irish detective who is trying to crack the Salieri case, put him behind bars. Tommy Angelo, he's fallen out with the family. He needs to get some protection for the people he loves. And so the game is told through flashbacks as he's sitting there with the detective, chatting about, what you guys did and all the various things that Tommy knows that could help incriminate Salieri and his boys and get, Tommy's loved ones a bit of protection. So it's interesting from that respect, and it's just told pretty well, I think. I really enjoyed the writing, I really enjoyed the dynamics between characters. I think, the set pieces were well put together, and they invited a lot of different mission varieties. You're pulling off different heists and doing other things too, like, there's this one mission early on, it's a little bit infamous if you're familiar with the game, but you go and you're betting a lot of money on a race car driver. But your race car driver and this other guy's race car driver are backed by the two rival mob families. So you're both trying to fuck with each other. You go to the other guy's car and you steal it and you bring it back to your mechanic. He fucks with it a little bit so it blows at the beginning of the race. Well, the other family went after your driver and broke his jaw, broke his arm. He can't race. So then you, Tommy Angelo, the family wheelman, has to get in the race car's driver's seat and then perform the race in his place. So there's just interesting things that the game does to add some variety, add some fun interactions, have you doing more than just, cover shooting, simple melee action, or simple chases through the streets of Lost Haven. And I think where the game is not its weakest, but its most formulaic, is in its gameplay department. The gunplay does feel good. I really enjoyed, how punchy the weapons feel. I like the period accuracy of them. And I feel like a lot of what I have to say about the gunplay informs the driving also. It's very much by the numbers. It's what you'd expect, but it's satisfying. I never found that the gameplay wasn't satisfying. I never found that it wasn't engaged by it. It just doesn't do anything particularly new. I would liken the game feel in a lot of ways to L.A. Noire, which is another title I absolutely love. So if you like the way that things felt there, then you're going to like this. The cover shooting is a little bit more fluid than L.A. Noire's was, but the driving I think is pretty spot on as a comparison. And because I do love a good cover shooter, I love myself my Uncharted games, I found myself really digging this and getting into a groove, figuring out which weapons work for me and things like that. The driving also, like we've been mentioning, while not particularly special, did engage me in a very particular way. Like I said, as I do love L.A. Noire, I found myself having a lot of fun driving like an absolute lunatic, trying to get from point A to point B, while causing a little bit of mayhem. I can't drive in real life, so I'm already at a disadvantage when it comes to, rules of the road, how to maneuver a fucking motor vehicle, but getting into the streets, I was, not cornering well, I was causing a real racket. But as you improve your skills, as you get into some interesting chase sequences, as you're just learning the ins and outs of the vehicle so you can get from point A to point B smoothly, you're going to really start to connect with this gameplay. Now, I think where the game is at its weakest is in its fidelity, which is interesting because certain portions of Mafia Definitive Edition are absolutely gorgeous. Playing through certain sequences of this game, I really think that Mafia, if it was consistently this good presentationally in terms of fidelity, would probably be one of the best, if not the best, looking game on PS4. But there are so many inconsistencies and so many moments where that fidelity is just absolutely nonsense that it's just simply not one of the most impressive games in the system. I think a wonderful example of this is a cutscene that I'll display up here in the gameplay because it happened very early on. I was doing a mission, I just had done a shootout, we were trying to, collect a debt from this location, they weren't giving the money, there was some pushback, there was a shootout, and I go in, I have to get my guy Sam out. I'm leaving with Sam, I'm leaving with the money, and all of a sudden, I get thrown onto a billiards table, he gets thrown away, I'm like, what the fuck is happening? And what it turns out had happened was that there was supposed to be a guy from the rival gang who was in the cutscene knocking us over, but the game simply didn't render him, so it looked like we were being attacked by an invisible man or like the fucking wind had pushed us over. Things aren't always as egregious as that, but there are, weird things where your characters will clip through each other during animations, things won't play exactly right, some lighting conditions are not great and make everyone look very rubbery. There's some rubbery-ass character models at certain portions in the game. And there was one moment in particular where the audio absolutely shit itself, and it sounded like a static channel on the radio or on TV. It was absolutely horrible. It happened out of nowhere. I don't know why it occurred, but I had to actually take my headset off and hold it away from my head because it was so loud and full of static. I didn't understand why this was happening. Playing with patches, bear in mind I'm on a base PS4, but playing with patches, these things are just unacceptable. And the load times are pretty long too, especially if you fuck up a chase sequence a couple times, you fuck up a gunfight a couple times, having to reload that and wait through those scenes again can get very tiring. And with the fidelity issues, I'm a little bit disappointed by the way that the game performs, especially when there's glimpses of this being one of the most engaging games from a presentation and fidelity standpoint on the console, but it's just really often undercut by all of these weird issues. But putting aside those technical problems, I really didn't have any problems with Mafia Definitive Edition. From a gameplay perspective, from a narrative perspective, I really loved this game. I blasted through it in just a couple sessions. I started it on a Thursday night and finished it on Saturday night, playing, I'd say probably 3 pretty meaty gameplay sessions in there, so it's not an especially long game. And it's important to note that while there is an open city for you to drive through, there isn't any side content in the game, which I think is to its benefit, because it means that every activity in the game feels very pointed and very deliberate, but it does mean there's not a ton to do here once you've finished that fairly short campaign. I'd say probably in the 10 to 15 hour range, but for me, I think that's a perfect length for a narrative. And so because I love this aesthetic, because I really found myself connecting with the characters, connecting with the gameplay, I really had an excellent time with Mafia Definitive Edition, and as of right now I have it as my 4th favorite game of 2020. It eluded me a little bit at launch just with other stuff happening, but I'm super glad I sat down to play through Mafia and really give it a shot. At the $40 price point, I think it's absolutely perfect. I don't think this is one to miss, and I'm really excited to play more of the franchise. I've heard that 2 is very good, but I've also heard the remaster on PS4 is absolutely atrocious, so I'm going to look a little bit more into that and see if I should play that on console or maybe play it on my laptop. And then I have 3 through PS Plus, so I'm excited to hop into that, even though I've heard it's a little bit shaky as well. Even with those things said, Mafia Definitive Edition on its own stands, I think, really tall, and outside of its technical issues is a really great third-person shooter with some fun other elements thrown in that help diversify the experience and make it as much a game about bombastic set pieces as it is about quieter character moments. And for that, I think it's a more thoughtful game than I expected, it's a more engaging game than I expected, and like I said on Twitter, shout out to my Twitter, link in the description, I went into Mafia Definitive Edition expecting to like it, but what I didn't expect and what I ended up doing is loving it. So guys, that is my review of Mafia Definitive Edition. If you've played it, let me know in the comments below, and even if you haven't played it, I'm telling you right now, you should like this video and subscribe to Backlog Banter, because we're putting out all manner of excellent content, game content, movie content, general bullshit. It's a lot of fun and you want to be along for the ride. And so, once you've done that, be sure to check out the description, because like I said, my Twitter is down there, but also Tucker's Twitter, Tanner's Twitter, Timo's Twitter, lots of T's. Not very easy for me to say all of those, but there's also, folks, a link to our Discord server, and we're always hanging out over there talking about games, talking about life, talking about movies. It's a good place to be. But with all that, I don't want to take too much more of your time. So I'll talk to you later. I'm going to go play some F-Zero on Super Nintendo Online. And yeah, hope you guys have a great day, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.